Welcome to the Upshot, Multi-World Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm the publisher, Charlie EIsenhood. Joining me is Josh Mansfield on this Tuesday, August 22nd. Hope everybody is having an awesome start to their week. We had the Discraft Great Lakes Open, the start of the Pro Tour playoffs this past weekend, and so much to discuss from a very fun tournament, 4 rounds at the Toboggan. But Josh, first, I just want to point out, I wanted to let you know, in case you missed this, the 49ers beat the Broncos in the preseason. NFL is almost back. We're about to start annoying our European listener base. But Josh, I know the preseason doesn't matter, but it matters.
Hey, Charlie, do you still have that picture that was the wallpaper on your phone for an entire season? Because
this
Denver managed all 4 wins last season, I think.
My God. And how did we lose to that team so bad? No Brock Purdy at that point.
That was the problem.
All right. Well, let's dive into this DGLO. So I said it in the rapid reacts for Multi-World Disc Golf subscribers. This is the People's Championship, Josh. Simon Lizotte owns Scoggins. Can you ask for a more popular pair of players to get wins? Obviously, Simon winning another one. I got some great stats for you about Simon's career at this point. Owen winning her first ever Elite Series after all of these years grinding, coming so close so many times, finally gets one and kind of does it in dominant fashion, Josh.
Yeah. Well, I saw, so on Facebook, Nate Sexton, I think, is the one who said on the broadcast that Simon is the most popular player in the world. And someone jumped on I think it was Facebook on the disc golf discussion page and put out a poll. Like, do you agree that Simon is the most popular player in the world? And it was like 99% voted yes. And when I checked, there were over 100 votes yes, and there were 3 votes that were no. And so I think you're spot on at that point. I mean, it's absolutely people who are just well liked in the community and by fans, and owned, like you said, in dominant fashion. I think the score, it did not feel as close as it was, right? Ella put together a nice run at the end, but at the end of the day, I mean, it was
she
already
had strokes
done
to give away.
Exactly. Like, I think Own plays a little bit different in a world where she doesn't have the strokes to give away for the entire tournament, really. I mean, but she was just so far ahead that it wasn't even funny.
I would like to point out in our fandom survey from late 2022, Simon was the second most popular player, quote unquote, in the world. Marginally behind Kristin Tattar, who was number 1. And so Simon was number 2. Owen Scoggins was the second most popular FPO player. She was 5th overall. 6th overall. Behind Nate Sexton, Calvin Heimberg, and Matt Oram. So, it's not totally true, but it's close to true. And sure. I would like to point out, we have a brand new 2023 version of the fandom survey out now. So head over to discgolf.ultiworld.com, find the Ultiworld Stat Mando survey. Please fill it out. It's got some updates this year, more players. We're also asking questions about, which pros discs have you acquired, purchased? So lots of fun stuff, and we're going to be able to dig into that data and see where things stand. Maybe Simon will be number 1. It's probably helpful that he wins as the survey is open for taking right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I did fill out the survey, so my part is done. So
nice.
Everyone else, go get it done.
Yeah, it's fun to do. It's fun to think about how you feel about players, and a lot of players you're kind of like, 5. I don't know. I don't root for them. I don't root against them.
Yeah. I had a lot of those in the middle of the pack.
So yeah, let's talk about some of the stats here. I mean, there's so many interesting things going on at this tournament. It's Simon's second win of the season. He's also the first player to 2 playoff wins, Pro Tour playoff wins. Now, we've had 2 years of playoffs. There's not been that many. There's 3 playoff events total, but he's won 2 of them.
Sure.
He's been strong in the late season, and he just puts together a magnificent pair of final rounds. 1075, 1069 rated. Somebody pointed this out over on Reddit, I think. if he had simply shot even par, basically just ignore the first 2 rounds, he would have finished 7th based solely on his rounds 3 and 4. Pretty crazy.
That is crazy.
And this is his 6th Elite Series or major win in the last 455 days. So, a year and a third-ish.
Yeah.
So dating back to May of 2022. And the next closest competitor to him in that stretch of time are Gannon Buhr and Ricky Wysocki, who each have 4 wins. So if you kind of take a longer view, Josh, you could talk about Simon as like one of the best players of the last 2 years. I mean, obviously he's one of the best. Where you put him in that pantheon, I mean, it's kind of a similar discussion that we've been having to, Gannon versus Calvin so far in 2023, where it's like, okay, Gannon's been winning a little bit more, but he's been much less consistent. Similar with Simon. Simon plays fewer tournaments, tends to be like really swingy in his performance, but I mean, the wins are the wins.
Right.
He's now got 50% more wins than anybody else over the last 2 years.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's interesting to think about because you just said that Gannon's been a little bit more swingy, which is funny when you're looking at the holistic view. You look last season and Gannon was the Calvin, just not winning, right? Gannon was always in contention, but he wasn't getting any wins until he finally gets to USDGC and then wins one of the biggest wins of the year. And then all of a sudden, Gannon, his season this year looks a lot more like Simon's season, where he misses cash and takes 50th, but then he'll turn around and win the weekend after. And Simon still doing that as well, right? And those players now, I made an offhand comment about this on the Rapid Reacts, but given this bigger discussion, I think is a noteworthy one. Simon is now tied with Calvin for wins on the season, right? Number 1 player in the world, Calvin, has as many wins as Simon and is now behind Gannon as well, as we talked about. And that is something that I think is an interesting perspective when you consider the success of players, not just in a single season, but in a holistic sense, when you compare the fact that Simon's inconsistency still is accumulating him more wins than any other player on tour.
Crazy.
And
some players are hot and cold.
Some players are hot and cold. And the other thing about it, no one publishes commemorative discs for regularly finishing the second place.
That's true.
But MVP is going to come out with another line of commemorative discs now.
I've been looking around at sales numbers and things, because the Infinites of the world, Power Grip over in Europe.
Sure.
Power Grip, which is easily the biggest retailer in Europe, their Q2 sales stats. Now, they don't publish raw numbers. They just give you comparative stats basically the same way Infinite does.
Yeah.
But MVP has really risen in the ranks, and they're now behind only Discmania and Innova at Power Grip. Of course, those 2 brands, long time strength in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you're seeing in their individual disc sales stats, like the Glow Axolotl Hex is like one of their top selling discs right now. And I feel like we're starting to see the signs perhaps that MVPs can start rolling out Simon specific discs. That hasn't happened yet. We basically have stock discs with Simon stamps. They've been hugely popular. But when we start to get the Macbeth style lineup of Simon, the Simon line,
yeah,
I mean, they're going to start selling like crazy. I mean, here we are like a week ago, Josh, being like, oh, did MVP overpay? I don't know. Like, I don't know. The numbers are really, really favorable when you just look at how things are right now, kind of just like trend wise. And there's just certain players who are worth that much. Mm-hmm. And I think it's Simon and it's Paul. It's like, that's the list. So it's pretty interesting. I think, Simon is now tied for 9th all time in Elite Series and major wins. Which is it's nice company to keep.
Yeah.
And interesting also, this is the first time we've had Simon and Eagle go 1-2 on the podium since 2019. And Simon actually mentioned it in his post-game interview that he's kind of like struggled when he's gone up against Eagle. And I was looking at the numbers, like lifetime, just in terms of overall who wins, who finishes higher at the tournament. Mm-hmm. Eagle is 50-25 against Simon.
And that's just in general,
that's just raw. Like they played at a tournament at the same time. Who finished ahead?
Eagle took 12th and Simon took 30th.
Yeah, which is kind of shocking when you think about it, because like Simon was an established pro when Eagle first came on the tour.
Sure.
And I was looking at their times when Simon had beaten Eagle when they were both like really in contention.
Okay.
And that is very rare. It's basically only happened one time before. It was 2018 Memorial when Simon got the win and Eagle finished second. And other than that, like the times that Simon has won, Eagle hasn't really been in the mix. So that's an interesting side note here. You think about the mentality and the kind of the mindset.
Sure. Coming
into the final round, Simon going up against Eagle, knowing that he's kind of been dominated by Eagle for the last 5 years.
Do you think... I know we talk about we talk about manufacturers as teams when it's convenient, and then we remind everyone that it's not actually a team when it's not. But I think that when you look at Simon and Eagle's relationship, both from a branding perspective, but also as a history perspective, as the Crush Boys, like it's clear that their relationship as teammates is probably the truest of just about, in the past, was the truest of just about any other alleged teammates in the industry, right?
They're like genuinely friends.
Right. They're genuinely friends. They're recording VODs together. And they have the branding that puts them together. Lots of things that kind of existed there. And I don't know. I don't follow the YouTube side of pros very closely, but I don't think I've seen like any videos with Simon and Eagle, or very many with Simon and Eagle. Like it doesn't feel like that. I'm sure they're still friends, but it feels different. It feels different.
It does feel different,
and I wonder if that played a role. It's different when, even at like an amateur tournament, when you're playing with your practice partner and best friend who you know is a little bit better than you, and you get into a final round, like there is a mentality that you have to kind of overcome about like, oh, this player usually beats me on this course, and like think about that. And I wonder if that dynamic has just changed since Simon has left Discmania, and that played a contributing role in it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it certainly helped, I think, that coming into the round, they're tied. Simon buries a monster putt on hole 1 from, out of position with Chris and Eagle closer. And then Eagle gets the horrible break. He misses the putt, and somehow it manages to roll itself out of bounds on like the gentlest slope of all time. I don't know how that was possible. And he ends up taking the bogey. So you get this 2-shot swing on hole 1. And I think, boom, like that settles you into the round. If you're Simon, you feel like, okay, like I have a little breathing room. Let's go play some disc golf. And then the two guys just matched each other hole for hole for hole for a long stretch.
And the only one they didn't, like 12 and 13, Simon got the birdie and Eagle got the par, and then it switched back, and then Eagle got the par, or Eagle got the birdie and Simon got the par.
Yeah, like Eagle just couldn't make up ground. And it wasn't like he was playing bad, but then, he takes the bogey on 16 when Simon goes big brain, and that was that. And boy, does that look, Simon's play looks so much smarter in retrospect. And I want to talk about this.
Sure.
So for those who haven't watched it, hole 16, island green, and you have to, if you come up short of the island, you got to go to the drop zone and putt from outside circle 1, like midway through circle 2.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go long of the green, if you go across the green and then you go over and past it, you just play from the island, like you crossed over inbounds area. So, I mean, I guess technically then, right, it's not an island.
Right, it's not.
Standard OB rules apply. So it's just, it looks like an island, but the island hole rule means that everybody goes to the drop zone when they miss the island. But so Simon steps up and just blasts a shot as hard as he can over the green, has no intentions of trying to land it on the green. It goes way over past, and he ends up getting to putt from about 8 feet from the backside of the green to take his par. Eagle doesn't cross over the island, goes out of bounds, goes to the drop zone, misses the putt, takes the bogey. So, do you think that what Simon did was legit? Let's just start with that. Was it legit?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes, it was legit. He knew the caddy book, he knew the rules, and played it appropriately to give himself and guarantee himself the par. I have zero qualms with that decision as in a terms like, was it legit? Was it fair? Absolutely. Every other player, Eagle could have done the same thing. All right. Like that opportunity was available to all players. It absolutely was legit. And he deserves the credit for that.
I mean, I think especially what makes it legit is that like, this wasn't some impossible birdie and like Simon somehow, loopholed the hole. Like, this is a hole that a third of the field took birdie.
Yes.
A third took par, a third took bogey or worse.
Yep.
Beautiful scoring separation. Honestly, it's a pretty darn good hole. Obviously, they're going to change this hole because this is not how it's intended to be played. You don't want to give people some option to just like blast it OB. But to me, this is the same thing as laying up.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how it's different.
Yeah.
People are like freaking out about it, but no, this is just smart disc golf. And it was very cool, right? They had the drone shot so you could really see that the disc goes straight over the top. The one time the drone shot really comes through for you, it goes over the back line and you can see that he squared it up dead center over the... And it's a risky play, It's a risky play.
Sure.
But it paid off.
Yeah, I mean, if he
put the onus on Eagle.
Right. Well, and here's the thing as well that I'll mention. You asked me in the Rapid Reacts what I thought of this, and I didn't realize quite how big of a deal it was going to be, because when he did it, I found it very entertaining. But Eagle had already gone OB. We know he's taken the bogey, and so like, I don't know. To me, it was just when Eagle took that bogey, it kind of felt like the tournament was over to me.
Right.
Right. And
right.
So at that point, whether Simon, I think even with a 2-stroke swing or 2-stroke lead, I think Simon is fine. And in hindsight, that was true. But at that time, I remember thinking like, if Simon wanted to, before he threw, I was like, if he goes OB, it doesn't matter. If he has to go from the drop zone and just follow Eagle, it goes back to, as long as he just keeps matching Eagle stroke for stroke, he is in Eagle's head, and he is the one who is very clearly going to come out on top. That proved to be true on hole 18 when Eagle goes up and is like, I'm going to try and blast this thing into the next county. It just didn't turn, so it went over the OB, right? Like it was clear that Eagle was rattled and was not going to be there. Like, Simon needed the 2 strokes. I found it very entertaining. I'm actually kind of surprised that there has been any controversy over this.
Well, I just think it's such a surprising play. I guess the question is whether there's actual controversy or not. There's been a lot of like hubbub on Reddit about Nate Heinold giving his opinion on whether Simon crossed, over the island or not. Not that Nate would know any better than anyone else because he was back at the tee. So how would he know?
Yeah.
I think that seems to be where the controversy is coming from more than anything else. But like, I don't know how anybody could look at this and say Simon did anything wrong.
Right.
I mean, this is just like basic golf strategy, right? And again, for me, it's the same thing as laying up.
Yep.
Oh, my competitor went out of bounds. I'm going to lay up. But the way to lay up on this hole was to blast it over the green and putt.
Yes.
For par. That's just smart.
It is smart.
You're reducing the variance of the hole.
Yep.
You have a chance to basically pick up a stroke if you do that. And that's exactly what happened. So overall, I mean, when you look at the way Simon played this weekend, it's always funny because every time, and we're going to have Simon on the show on Thursday, so we'll look forward to chatting with him. Every time he wins these tournaments, he's like, I don't know how I did it. I admit, it just clicked. It's always like this, like it like surprises him. So I don't really know what to make of that, but I do think that there's something about like when he gets off to a good start, then he can really keep it going. And so I guess I just wonder why we don't see this more often from Simon, given that he obviously has the skill to do it week in and week out.
Well, it's actually, I'm gonna correct you just a little bit, because Simon often doesn't say like when it clicks. That's the idea for a player, that everything came together and worked, right? And like your game was feeling right. Simon's biggest thing that he always says is he doesn't feel like he plays any different when he takes 50th or when he takes first, right?
That's true.
Simon feels like he's always clicking. It's just, it doesn't go his way sometimes. And that's what I think is actually really interesting, is because players like Gannon will place 50th and they'll say, yeah, my swing wasn't proper. It wasn't in the right form, right? I knew I was off my lines. Macbeth, when he plays poorly, my timing was off, right? I knew that my timing with this certain shot was a problem. Putting, right? You know, plenty of players will say, oh, I just couldn't get the putter going, and that's why I ended up not winning. And Simon's just like, yeah, I don't know, man. I played like I always do, and just didn't go my way. It's almost, it's funny because like you get on people who blame the course and blame the tee pads and blame the baskets, and you know, like we give a lot of people a hard time when they assign the blame elsewhere. And I don't want to say Simon assigns the blame necessarily, but I truly think that he feels that 90% of the time he plays his game, and the rest, like, it's just out of his control whether he wins or loses when he plays that game. He knows he has the skills. Sometimes players play better than him. Sometimes the course just beats him up a little bit. And that's just like the nature of the game. And I think that that's actually a pretty positive view about disc golf at times as well.
Yeah. I mean, just sometimes your shots land inbounds and sometimes they don't. And this week they did.
Yeah.
He finished circle one in regulation at number one.
Yep.
His putting was awesome this weekend. I mean, I think that often feels like the differential for Simon specifically is like, how is he putting?
Yeah.
And he was awesome this weekend. 94% C1. So he just kind of put it all together, which I think you had to. Look how tight the leaderboard was through 2 rounds.
Yeah.
Even through 3 rounds, it still felt like there was a chance that it would be somebody other than Eagle and Simon. And, shout out to Chris Dickerson for finding some rhythm again. It's pretty exciting if you're a Dickerson fan to finally see him getting right ahead of Worlds where we know he can be a real threat.
Mm-hmm. Have to consider him in the mix.
Got to. And obviously we'll talk a lot more about Worlds as we get into next week. And we'll probably start doing Worlds preview stuff Thursday. And then we'll hit you with the mega preview on Tuesday next week before we start to do daily recap, rapid react shows for all of our Ulti-World Disc Golf subscribers. And one of those shows will also go out publicly on Thursday. So that would be the round 2 recap, I guess. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah. I think they had talked about doing like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I thought there was like a mention of that when they first were talking, or there was another tournament that talked about it.
I don't know.
But you're right, it is.
They used to do Tuesday to Saturday for Worlds. They did it last year, remember?
Yeah, that's what it was. That must have been it.
It was like a total blunder to do that. That's not happening in Vermont.
That's right. I kind of like, I'm like, Worlds last year, Paul and Kristin won, and then like everything else is just kind of like scrubbed from my brain. And when I actually like dig back in deep, I'm like, oh, I don't want that. Then I close that back up.
Ooh, the trophy. Ooh.
Finished on Saturday. Oh, spectators didn't exist.
All right, we got to talk about Own the dog Scoggins.
Yes,
Own Scoggins getting a win on tour, first ever Elite Series win, and was just awesome this weekend. This was her highest ever Elite Series round rating performance. And she could have had a couple extra strokes in that final round potentially and done even better, but she averages 1,000 rated disc golf over the weekend. She beats out Ella Hansen, who played her best tournament of her career by rating, and ends up winning by 2 strokes. But as you said earlier, maybe a little misleading on how close it actually was. But Ella played great Owen was just sharper. She just played better disc golf, right? From a sense of choosing the spots to attack, staying in between the lines, making the putts. This was a masterclass Owen performance. And Josh, it's just incredible to watch her continue to excel at her age.
It really is. Interestingly, and I didn't know this, but did you know that Owen came into this tournament as the UDisc win probability favorite?
I'm not surprised. I was saying this in the reacts that she was the highest rated player. Like, you would expect her to be the favorite, right?
Yeah.
What was her
one would
percentage?
think? What one would think. I did not, but
Did you see what her percentage was?
It's 22%. So going into the tournament, 22% win probability. Katrina Allen, Missy Gannon at 16%. So she had about six points on Missy and Katrina. And end of round one, Owen jumps up to a 63% chance to win.
There you go.
And Missy Gannon at 15%, but by that point she was at 4 strokes behind. And end of round 2, she hit 91%, and then going into final round 97%, and that number never decreased. It was 97 or higher the entire time.
That shows you it was a wire-to-wire performance from Owen.
Yeah.
So I guess the question, Josh, is how did she do it? Because here's the very interesting fact, courtesy of a Statmando fan, right? This came off of their social media and was posted in the Statmando Discord.
All right, sick.
Owen had no birdies on par threes. And apparently, in the last 3 years, she's the only major elite or silver winner to win with 0 birdies on par threes during an event.
That makes sense. Par 3, like short par threes are like exist on FPO courses, right? Like ones that are just gimmies that are must-haves. So
yeah. So Scoggins ended up +5 on the par threes over the course of the weekend. That's the second worst score of any winner, behind only Kristin Tattar, who was +6 on par threes at the 2022 DDO. Crazy fact. And to think of Owen being 0 for on par threes, like that's crazy.
Here's the other 2 things that I want to highlight with that, though, that I think are really critical. 2022 DDO was in the middle of an absolute hurricane level winds, right? That was the crazy windy weekend where scoring was just nowhere to be seen because of how difficult it was. So that's a poor comparison right there. I'm not trying to roast this fan. Like I just think those are 2 very different circumstances based on tournament conditions. And here's the second part. So if you look at and this is something I wanted to highlight, and I'll take a minute to do it real fast. DGLO had an excellent scoring course for the FPO division. 25 under par to MPO's 30 under par is probably the closest. I could scroll through real quick on the schedule.
It's up there, though.
But it's up there. And it also felt, a lot of the holes felt more appropriate as well, right? And that's proof with Owen. The fact that other players are taking birdies on par threes, just Owen wasn't in this kind of weird tournament. But on the par fours, she was. I think that this was something that was a very, very impressive layout that really facilitated and highlighted different elements of the FPO game that I thought was exciting. For reference, Owen did the 5 over par on the par threes versus the 6 over par. Kristin's final score at DDO in 2022 was even. Owen was 25 under par while playing 5 over par on the par threes.
Wow. Man, it feels like we've really come a long way this year in terms of FPO layouts and scoring, because think about that. That was the crazy wind year, though. So that was kind of its own beast.
Yeah, exactly.
When we had to suffer through Emporia twice in the season.
That was another, when we were doing our little worlds, things I tried to put in the back of my head, that we had to do Emporia twice.
Joan Supreme. So I just looked at the par threes. They were really hard. So
Okay.
it's not really an own specific thing. I think if you looked at a lot of players, you would see this. I mean, all of the par threes played super long. So, hole 1, 516 feet, 0 birdies in round 4. Nobody
Sure.
even got into the circle. Hole 5, 480-foot par 3, 9% got birdie. Hole 9, 472-foot par 3, 9% got birdie. Hole 11 was the most attackable, 21% birdie at a 442-foot hole. Then a 267-foot hole 12, that was the shortest one on the course, 12% got birdie. And then hole 16, 396 feet, 9% got birdie. So there's no hole, par 3, where more than 20% got a birdie. So it shows you there's still work to do for tuning these holes, because the par 4s and 5s played really easy and the par 3s played really hard. So you kind of still need to make some adjustments to pin locations or tee pads in order to kind of get the scoring separation a little bit better. But just a very interesting note.
Here's what I'll highlight, though. You're right. In terms of, hole 8, for example, 53% birdie, 44% par. Hole 10, 50% birdie, 50% par, no bogeys. That pendulum may have swung a little too far in some of those, but and this is only in round 4 that I'm looking at right now. Hole 3, 29% birdie, 50% par, 18% bogey. Hole 4, 24% birdie, 59% par, 1% or 15% bogey. Hole 7, 18% birdie, 47% par, 26% bogey, 6% double bogey. There are some holes, and a handful of them, I would say, even almost half, that have very nice scoring separations. There are some improvements to be made, but I would rather see tournaments err in this direction than the opposite direction.
Right. I totally agree.
This made it much more enjoyable to watch them score and to score well.
So, Owen was very solid tee to green, but as usual, her brilliance came on the putting green. And there's really 2 things that stand out to me for why she won this tournament. One is she gained almost 11 strokes putting, 92% C1X to lead the tournament, 22% Circle 2 putting, third at the tournament. Meanwhile, she only goes out of bounds 5 times. The next closest, she was number 1 in that category. Next closest was Missy Gannon, going out of bounds 7 times. So Owen really minimized the pain, the OB pain, and ultimately, I think that's why she beat Ella. Ella got more birdies. Ella was much better tee to green by almost 10 strokes. But she went out of bounds 5 more times and certainly did not putt as well as Owen. Although she did pretty well, 83.7, not bad. It was a really good, strong tournament performance from Ella. I mean, you have to admit it, and it makes sense. We kind of expected her to play well on this track, but Owen Scoggins able to just maximize her game. That's the thing, right? That's disc golf. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be the best at everything. You don't have to be a bomber thrower to be successful if you can attack the holes you're capable of, not burn yourself with OB, make your putts.
And to highlight some of the things that you talked about here with Ella as well, because I think you're spot on with Owen and the success that she has. There are some things that Ella deserves credit for. She was 9th in scramble at 58%, and has an example in the final round in round 4, hole 7, 8, 9. 8, including an OB, she manages to scramble 3 times in order to keep it just at pars and minimize, even with that OB, the risk that she could have had of being off the fairway. Consider, for example, on hole 7, as well as hole 8, both required her to have 27-foot putts in order to secure the par. Those of Ella past, those are bogeys. And she takes a lot of red and orange in that middle section. And this is even further for Owen. And it's not even a conversation of Ella being even near her. And that is something that I found was impressive about Ella this weekend, is even when she had OB strokes, and the course facilitates that for sure. Like we talked about with some of the soft par 4s, in round 2, she went OB on hole 3 and hole 8 and managed to save the par on both of those. But that is still pressure, right? When you give a stroke away for free, you're essentially saying, in order for me to get par, I have to play it for birdie. I've got to play it perfectly. And she did that. And she had lots of 27-foot putts in those pressure situations that secured her pars. And that is so much different than compared to Waco when she was in contention to win and had a couple of points that she just melted under the pressure. This is a very, very encouraging performance for Ella Hansen. And while it is overshadowed by Own getting her first win and one of the most exciting wins of the season when you look at who won, it is still an encouraging sign to see Ella up there with Own in this manner.
Well, let's talk about who was not there. Kristin Tattar. Own actually shouted out Kristin in the post-round interview saying, "Thank you, Kristin, for not being here." Meanwhile, Kristin was playing over in Estonia at the European Championships. She built an enormous lead after shooting a 1054 rated second round. Just insane disc golf from Kristin Tattar. But, Josh, she then proceeded to shoot sub 900 rated disc golf, an 8 over par in the final round, totally out of sync, going out of bounds, couldn't make a putt, everything was going wrong, and honestly, although it really never came super close to actually losing her like 13, 15, whatever it was, stroke lead, it was like close enough where you were thinking it could happen, because Silva Saarinen played incredible and was what made it possible for Kristin to give it away, basically. Kristin did not give it away. She won. Very emotional, tears, talked about what a hard day it was out on the course. And a lot of the focus has been on not Kristin winning, which was expected, of course, but rather that she was wearing some tape on her elbow and had talked about a little bit of elbow pain being an issue for her at the end of round 3. And then she has this really bad final round, and everybody is going straight to, she's hurt her arm. She's not going to be able to play at Worlds. She's cooked. There's no chance. Like, she's done for the season. I've seen the craziest takes of my life about this online. From what? From her having tape on her arm.
Right.
So, Josh, I went and I watched the whole round, the whole final round.
Okay.
She obviously did not play well.
Sure.
But she was still getting birdies. And honestly, it just looked like she was a little off with the drive and off with the putt. And then those two things in combination, combined with the amount of out of bounds on this course, basically playing the MPO layout, by the way, made her have a really shitty day. But I never saw her wince. I never saw her holding her elbow or like babying it or like throwing, only backhands or only forehands. She was still playing normal disc golf and looked totally fine to me. I'm at the point where I'm saying this is totally overblown. Kristin is fine. I do agree that it injects some level of uncertainty into what we might see at Worlds, given that she is dealing with at least some level of discomfort because she was playing a 8,800 foot course for 4 rounds. But I think Kristin should still be considered the heavy favorite at Worlds. She shot 1,007 rated disc golf at Smugs last year to win by like 7 strokes or some monster, maybe 9 strokes. She should still be the favorite. The elbow stuff is totally overblown. She said nothing that she has some kind of injury or anything like that.
I just did a quick math because I think that you highlight something really important, right? In terms of the fact that, yes, she had a bad round, but like you said, you're not seeing the signs of injury. There's something else that I want to highlight as well. Her 8 over was bad. It was a bad round, but it was not like so bad that it's like not in a good like perspective of like how the where the rest of the field was. So I just went through on round. I just looked at where the cut line was, right? So top 16 ties played. If you take the average score of those, or if you look at the difference, right? So the score between Kristin and then the last cut was 29 over par. Kristin was 11 under par. Silva Saarinen 8 under par. Evelina, 3 under par. That's it. That's it for who is under par. 8 over par was less than the round average for FPO in 3 of the 4 rounds. And the only round it wasn't was round 4 where there was the cut. But after the cut, the average was still about 4 over par. So Kristin had a bad round. She came back down to earth and then some. But I really think that there is, in context of like what that course can do by playing the MPO layout, a bad day that she, if she was on a course better tuned for FPO that had an FPO layout, would not have looked like this. And so it really, I think, exacerbated the fears because of playing in Europe, sharing the tee pads with the men, and how well she had been earlier in the week, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the contrast is that
that's the hardest part. Yeah.
That she goes, well, so let's see. She shot a 73 after shooting a 54 in round 2.
Right.
She shot 19 strokes worse than she did in round 2, which is obviously just totally crazy. But it just goes to show you, right? When you're not making your putts and you're going out of bounds, like you can just pile up the numbers. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened to Kristin. So I could be proven wrong, but I think people who are saying stuff like she's not going to play at Worlds, what are you talking about? She has said, what are you saying? Like, you're making stuff up. You're just making stuff up. I get people like want to like latch onto some drama because it feels like so oppressive that Kristin is so dominant. And it does open the door to being like, well, maybe her elbow is still going to be uncomfortable next week. But I didn't see any signs that she has some kind of injury like she had last year, which, by the way, she still came back and dominated at Worlds, completely dominated everybody. It wasn't even close. Just want to remind you of that.
Right. Well, and that's exactly the point. And we haven't even mentioned the fact Kristin shot a 1054 round 2. Tied for the 5th highest round, or it has solo 5th. It's 5th highest round rated in FPO history.
It's insane.
It was an incredibly dominant performance. And the funny thing was up until that point, I was watching and comparing her strokes to the MPO strokes. And after round 2, she was tied for 10th in MPO. And after round 3, she was in the top 20 still for MPO. And then I was like, okay, let's and then obviously it has the bad round, and I didn't do that exercise at that point. But like Kristin would have been legitimately competitive on the MPO side up through round 3. That's how strong of a tournament she had up until that point.
Shout out to Dennis Augustsson, who, coming off of a win at the Swedish Championship, won the European Disc Golf Championship by 10 strokes. He dominated. Beat out Jesse Nieminen and Juna Heinonen, and all of the big names in Europe, pretty much. And so Augustsson, very impressive. Opened up with 1086 and 1079 rated rounds. Was able to pretty much coast from there into a European Championship.
Good for him. What a dominant win.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Josh has some thoughts on the playoffs. We're also going to take a look at the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship cut line and how things changed after this weekend. We've also, of course, got our Purse Watch Hole 18 reviews. Stay with us. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. Right now, 2023 Sextathorpes and Big Germ Octathorpes are available, and you can also save a little scratch. If you want last year's Big Germ Octathorpe, use code UPSHOT and you'll get 15% off. Get yourself an awesome bag today over at PoundDiscGolf.com. Again, save 15% on the 2022 Big Germ Octathorpe using code UPSHOT. Welcome back to the Upshot. Still, and tail end of summer, Josh. We're both looking pretty summery today. We got the same shirt color situation going on. Kind of a turquoise aqua.
This is the Ron John Surf Shop shirt we got when we were down in Florida last year.
Nice.
So yeah.
I just got this palm tree shirt on like crazy sale, 70% off.
Oh,
or
nice.
something. Yeah.
That's the best.
That's the best, right?
That's the best. It's the best. Yes.
So this was the first weekend of the Disc Golf Pro Tour playoffs. There's like kind of, they do it just like the FedEx Cup, right? In the PGA Tour. They have these tournaments 1, 2, 3, DGLO MVP Pro Tour Championship with progressively fewer people allowed in. Yep. So we go from 96
based on overall standings.
Right. 96 MPO at DGLO, 72 MPO at MVP, and then 32 for the Pro Tour Championship. So we've already discussed the problem here. Too many players are in. Like 72 players at MVP is everyone that you know, and like a couple random people don't get in. So, Josh, what do you think is the fix?
Yeah. So I want to preface this. So we got an email from Hawk, a Upshot listener, and Hawk has emailed in before, and he says, doesn't the term playoffs imply elimination? For disc golf, what are you being eliminated from? He then suggests, how about you don't get to go to Worlds if you finish below a certain point? I don't know if I quite agree, but we'll get to that.
I could say,
and then he says
I definitely don't agree.
No. But then he says the Tour Championship works because players get eliminated round to round. And I thought about it, and you brought up the idea that everybody we know gets to play at MVP is absolutely true. And it's in part because the impact of DGLO is not significant enough for most players to exclude them from registering then for MVP as well. Well, actually, it definitely isn't, because registration opens well before. And so you have players who just don't have to play DGLO and still have enough to roll into MVP, and some who, like Garrett Gerthy, for example, didn't play DGLO this weekend, and he still registered to play MVP and is barely outside of the Tour Championship, despite the fact that he only dropped one spot. He did not play a playoff event and dropped one spot in standings and is still sitting 33rd, right? That's a problem for your playoff system if players don't have to play and they are still, like, he's a bubble guy who didn't have to play and he only dropped one spot. That to me is the biggest evidence that this system doesn't work well, is that he doesn't have to. So I read Hawk's email and I was thinking a lot about it. And I think that you make the playoffs meaningful. Everybody gets to register, or a certain number of people get to register for DGLO based on how well they played. Okay. And throughout the season. So standings, top 96. Great. Top 96 and exemptions. Once you play DGLO, you have to finish inside the top, whatever number we want to pick. Let's say 50. And if you finish outside the top 50 at DGLO, you don't get to register for MVP. Now, on the MPO side, lots of players still make it in, right? Most of your guys make it through the first round, which probably should be the case, right? But the likes of, how about this? Andrew Marweed finished 51. Andrew Marweed does not get to play an MVP now. He did not make it to the second round of the playoffs. And Andrew Marweed is like a name that we could actually see play well at MVP.
So then is your idea that then you would go to MVP and you would do the same thing into the Tour Championship?
It is. Now, the one caveat is I think the Tour Championship should protect half the spots for winners and placement. So if you are in the top 10 of the Disc Golf Pro Tour or have a win, you auto-qualify in to the Pro Tour Championship.
Or
and then
top
they fill
15,
right, half the spots.
X number of spots from the tournament itself.
It's essentially a really long play-in to the Pro Tour Championship over the course of several tournaments. So your season standing is either to get you into the Pro Tour Championship by being one of the top in the world, or you have to work your way through this pretty brutal playoff system. And then at MVP, you take the top 15 people who aren't already qualified, and they get the spot at the Pro Tour Championship next.
It's an interesting idea. I feel like it puts a little too much variance into the mix because it so much matters how you play at one or two tournaments, whether you get to play in the Tour Championship. But as long as you're holding enough spots for top finishers for the overall standings. It could work. I could see it work.
Here's what I will admit to. This is steeped in honestly like NFL style, but really like American style sports, right? Where the NFL is like it doesn't matter. Remember when Lamar Jackson won unanimous MVP 3 years ago with the Ravens and then lost first round in the playoffs? And like the Ravens were like this monster team that were just going to do amazing things, and then they lost first round. Like that's how the NFL is, right? You get in and it's a very cutthroat. You have to play well. What you did in the season doesn't matter. You have 3 games to make it to the biggest stage. It is a very similar philosophy. Now, I'm saying there should be the caveat of some spots that are protected for the top players because people want to see them. But yeah, it does put emphasis on them. But that's the playoffs. If you're gonna call them playoffs, they should have emphasis. That's my philosophy on playoffs.
Sure.
So for example, let me give you a good example. Katrina Allen is high enough in the standings that she would have secured a spot otherwise. But like Katrina Allen would not be playing in MVP next weekend because she finished 28th of 30.
Yeah, I mean,
in a couple weekends.
Well, I mean, if you think of any other sport, that's how the playoffs work, right? If you suck in the first round, even if you had an incredible season, sorry, bye-bye.
Yeah. And now there is a protection, right? Katrina still gets into the Tour Championship because she has played well enough for the season to earn a spot. But yeah, you're out. You don't get to play MVP. You don't advance to the second round.
I mean, it definitely would be better than what we have now. I think the alternative thing is to just do it more like the FedEx Cup does it, which is that the FedEx Cup playoffs, they have 3 tournaments in a row. They have their first one with a cut to 70, second one with a cut to 50, third one with a cut to 30. Those might not be the specific numbers, but it's pretty close. And those are meaningful cuts. Even cutting to 70 is a meaningful cut when they have 144 people at a typical PGA Tour event.
Yeah.
So the problem is right now, the cutoff numbers are too high. So if you wanted to cut it down to 72 MPO for the first tournament, DGLO, and then you cut it to 48 for the second tournament, and then you cut it to 32 for the Pro Tour Championship, now we're talking, right? There's actually people not making it in. But I kind of like the idea of having it be an actual progressive system. You'd have to tinker at the edges to get it right, but interesting concept. Interesting concept.
Thanks for the email, Hawk.
Yeah. Email us your thoughts. Mailbag. No. You can email mailbag@ultiworld.com, but you can also email upshot@ultiworld.com. They both get to us. Let's check in on the cut line. Okay. What happened this weekend? The answer is not too much. In MPO,
that's my problem.
In MPO, nothing changed. Robert Burridge gained some ground, but he's still the bubble player first out. Andrew Presnell only picked up 3 points this weekend, so the gap is closing. And currently, Prez is, let me see exactly how many points he's in front of Burridge. It is
about 16 points.
16 points, yes.
Yeah.
Robert Burridge definitely has a chance to play in. By the way, you mentioned Garrett Gerthy earlier. He was planning to play DGLO, so I'm not sure why he scratched.
Checked his socials, didn't see.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there, but he's 40 points back of Prez. And does not have an auto qualifier spot, so he's going to have to get something going here at MVP and Worlds. A lot of points still on the line, right? We still have 250-point events to go, so there could still be quite a bit of movement. Other guys who are just outside right now: Yuli, Eric Oakley, Chandler Kramer, Brody Smith. But no changes in MPO. In FPO, Juliana Korver moves up 7 spots into 18th, so now she is in, thanks to a 64-point gain this weekend after finishing 13th. And then you have Lisa Fakis and Hannah Wynn, who are tied for 19th. Now, technically, the line now is at 18 because Paige has now dropped out of the top 20. But Paige probably isn't going to play, if I had to guess. Just based on the injury situation. If she plays, the line will be 18, and Juliana Korver would be last in. If she does not play, then right now, Lisa Fakis and Hannah Wynn are literally tied at 508.25 points. So a lot could happen there. Holly Finley also climbing 3 spots. She is less than 1 point behind. Rebecca Cox falling out as Juliana Korver jumps in. Cox, though, still just 3 points shy of the cutoff. Alexis Montejano also very close. Luca Lorenzen is in the conversation. Even Henna Blomroos coming back for Worlds and MVP will have a chance to play in.
The one downside that Holly Finley is looking at in that group is that she is not registered for MVP. Neither is Rebecca Cox. So you've got a handful of players not registered, a couple of players that are there at the bubble that are not registered for MVP.
I would guess that they will now register because they are certainly qualified. I think they maybe had to wait until after DGLO.
Maybe at the point when it opened they weren't qualified yet. I don't know.
Right.
I just pulled at least Holly Finley's PDGA page and it still shows not registered, so we'll have to see.
TBD.
TBD. But if they don't play, I mean, that's going to be a big knock against them.
Oh, sure.
In
I mean, you kind of have to play if you're a bubble player.
All players 19 and above are registered for that tournament right now. So,
all right, let's do our purse watch. Here we go. DGLO, $64,250 for MPO, $35,750 for FPO, $100K on the nose. We don't know exactly how much added cash, but it was at least $60,000. That was in the notes about the tournament. As we talked about with Nate Heinold a little while ago, or maybe this was just in a conversation I had with him subsequently. This tournament has a lot fewer players than a typical event. So 100K payout is actually, it means there's a lot of added cash because they didn't have nearly as many players as they have at a typical Pro Tour Elite Series. $15,000 to Simon for the win, $10,000 to Own for the win. Those are some of the biggest payouts of the year. So real money on the line for winning, more so than at a typical event.
Yeah, it is the highest for the MPO side on the entire season, and the only one that beats the FPO was Des Moines, where they had the $5,000 donation for the FPO winner in order to make the numbers the same. So big payouts, and that makes a lot of sense, right? There's a smaller field, and they have tons of added cash. So it not only does it eclipse, it hits the 100,000 mark, which is one of the highest of the season.
They're paying
less
out
people
fewer.
to pay out.
Yeah,
exactly.
Point.
So definitely going to be a lucrative tournament if you cash.
Coming up on Worlds, crazy numbers in terms of registered players. It should be the biggest FPO field ever. And MPO has a 26-person wait list with like 270 people registered. So we'll get into all of the World stuff very soon. Hole 18 review. Let's do it quick, and then we're out of here. Josh, they made it a lot harder. It was the hardest hole on the course. Changed the par. Totally different kind of a hole. What'd you think?
I really liked the MPO hole, actually. This is one of those that I feel like as a par 4 was really well done. And oftentimes we like seeing the 5s because the par 5s give you a chance at an eagle. But on the MPO side, I actually thought that the par 4 was an appropriate, like it was just perfect. I thought it was perfect. I loved how hard it was. It had some real danger and threat. Eagle showed us that for sure. But it also was a birdie that was possible, but it was a bonus birdie if you got it. I think that is excellent. I also love the use of elevation, and that's true across this course, and something that I think makes it stand out relative to other courses, but especially on hole 18. If your course is known and defined by its elevation changes, you need to feature that on your final hole. They did so. It's a widespread in terms of scoring, and I was a big fan of the hole 18 change. I especially liked it better. I don't want a par 3 on hole 18. I don't think that is interesting enough. You need at least a par 4. This is an appropriate change on the MPO side. I give it an 8.
I'm also with you. I give it an 8. I just think it's a great hard hole.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, not every hole has to be super birdieable. Like, this was not a super easy birdie. 12% got a birdie in round 4. It played as the hardest hole in the course, averaging more than a half stroke over par. Only 11% of players getting inside circle 1 in regulation. It's a bear of a hole, but I thought it was really cool. I like the way that the green is really tucked back in there. There's OB everywhere. You have to execute multiple excellent shots in order to get a birdie. I think it's awesome, right? It puts a lot of pressure on players. And, ultimately, there wasn't drama because of where Simon was, but you can't count on that. For FPO, didn't play quite as well in my mind, but I still give it a 7. It was the hardest hole in the course, but it was one where you had to have big power to score, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but there's just a lot of holes like that on this course.
So I had a 6 and I'm revising mine to a 7. And it's actually because for the reason I want to disagree just slightly with what you said. You said you have to have big power. And I was like, yeah, that's got to be true, right? So I go to round 1 and it was Ella, Holland, Katrina. That's who birdied. I'm like, yep, okay, makes sense. Round 2. Owen Scoggins birdied this hole. Round 3. Owen Scoggins birdied this hole, which means that it is not just pure distance, right? That I thought that this hole was inaccessible unless you have just a cannon of an arm, and it doesn't appear that that was the case. Not only did Owen birdie it, but she was in circle 1 in regulation. It does require that you have a strong forehand, and that is an element that I think is lacking in a lot of FPO players' games. There are players, though, that do have that habit, and Ella and Holland are both examples who have power forehands, and that's why they were able to birdie this hole so consistently. I think Ella birdied it every round this weekend. Nope, she missed round 2. But anyway, my point is, if Owen can birdie this hole, like, she has distance that is manageable and a lot of other people can birdie, and shows me that this is a hole where distance is not the only issue about what makes it difficult, and I appreciate that. So I give it a 7 with you.
Owen's distance has improved to the point where it is no longer handicapping her game in a major way.
And that's true, but it's also not her strength.
No, we can all agree with that.
Yeah.
We can all agree with that. All right. That is going to do it for today's episode of the Upshot. Josh and I both picking up a couple of points in our podium picks. Neither of us picking any winners, though. We both had Own, so we get points there. And then, who the heck did I have on the MPO side?
We both had Eagle.
But neither of us picked Simon. So we both get 2 points there. Josh wins the over-under. Manabu Kajiyama did not finish better than 25th. Where was he, Josh?
Hang on, I gotta go look. It's a big number. 66. He was 41 strokes off the lead.
He was 8th from the bottom.
Yeah.
Welcome to the U.S., Manabu. Only up from here, my friend. So Simon and Owen will join us on our show on Thursday. We'll also start to talk a little bit about Worlds. We're actually hoping to have Manabu on at some point if we can get our schedules to sync up. So we'll love to get the chance to talk with him as he's come over for Worlds. And boy, so much to talk about for the World Championships. It's 1 week away. So get ready, and we will break it all down and live Rapid React shows every single day during the tournament. For Josh Mansfield, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long. We'll talk to you Thursday right here on The Upshot.